So the other day I was at work and I walked by this little guy on my way to get a coffee, and something just clicked in my brain. I was thinking to myself, how hard could it be to actually manufacture one of these? Now for context, I am a software engineer for an industrial equipment manufacturer, and what you're looking at right here is a key that changes the state of one of our controllers. And I thought, somebody out there is trying to buy replacements for these, and if I could manufacture them, I could probably make some money. I mean, this is only a couple of cents of plastic and a little keychain. And this idea has been stuck in my mind all day, so I asked my boss if I could take this thing home, and luckily he let me. So in this video, what I'm going to do is try and replicate this thing as closely as possible, produce some of them, and see if I can make money selling them on eBay. So the first thing I did is search up the model number of the PLC that I pulled this key out of, and that is the Compact Logix L45. So just looking up a replacement key on Google brings me to many pages that sell them, and it gives me an exact model number that I can search for. But when I look them up, it looks like they're all out of stock or extremely expensive. Like one that I found was $300, and I only found a couple of sold ones on eBay. They were sold in a 10-pack for like $150, and 3 of these things did actually sell, so somebody out here is buying them. On top of that, I found another listing for a PLC key very similar to this, and 110 of these things have sold. So that's pretty much all the validation I need to think that this is worthwhile. So now I'm going to break out the calibers and start modeling this thing in FreeCAD. So I'm going to start by measuring and modeling this rectangular base. So I've got my calipers here, and this guy appears to be 9 millimeters tall. It looks like 16 millimeters wide about, and 3 millimeters thick. So over in FreeCAD, I'm just going to make a new part. And I'm going to make a sketch on the XY axis. Now I'm just going to draw a rectangle starting from this origin point. And I'm going to make it 9 millimeters tall and 16 millimeters wide. Now I'm going to close this sketch, and I'm going to pad it 3 millimeters. So I'm going to model it with this barrel facing the left. So let me measure the diameter of this barrel. I'm going to exclude this little tip for now, and we can put that on later. So this barrel is 4 millimeters in diameter, and it appears to be centered on this base, but it's slightly wider than the base. So in FreeCAD, I'm just going to click the left face, and I'm going to add another sketch. And I'm going to add some external geometry just to find this center point. So I've added a point in the top left corner, and I'm going to draw a construction line from that to the origin. And now right in the center, I'm going to place a construction point. And you can tell that it's in the center by these 2 little arrows. So now what I'm going to do is make a circle from the center, starting at that point that I just created. And I'm going to make its diameter 4 millimeters. Now I can close this sketch, and let's measure the length of this barrel. And that looks to be about 5.6 millimeters. So in FreeCAD, I'm just going to extrude this 5.6 millimeters. So now what I need to do is measure this little nub on the top of the barrel. It appears to be 2 millimeters long. It is 1 millimeter wide. And it appears to also be about 1 millimeter tall. So I'm just going to create a new datum plane starting at this face right here. And we're just going to make our sketch on the datum plane for now, and then we're going to measure the offset afterwards. So I'm going to click this datum plane, and I'm going to click to create a sketch. Now I'm going to hide the datum plane so that we can click our part. And I'm going to bring in some external geometry. Now what I'm trying to do is just position this little nub right here in the center. So I'll make a construction point in the center of this line. And then I will draw a construction line between that and the base of that cylinder. So that gives us a point here that is centered on the base of this cylinder, and that is where I'm going to draw the nub. Now this was 1 millimeter wide, and it should also be 1 millimeter tall. So I'm just going to make these 2 equal. Now I'll put a construction point in the bottom center of this, and then I will constrain this to that point that we created at the base of the cylinder. Well, that did not work because I want it to actually overlap this cylinder. So I guess what I'm going to do is just extend this by something like 0.15 millimeters. Let's go back and do that. So this line is no longer going to be equal to the other one. And I guess I need to offset this thing down 10 millimeters. So I'm going to create that construction point again, but then I'm going to create a construction line that is constrained vertically and is 0.15 millimeters long. Now I can use this point to constrain to the base of the cylinder. And that looks pretty good to me. So let's close this sketch. And I'm actually going to extrude this nub 2 millimeters. Awesome. So that looks about right. Now I want to offset this forward a little bit. So I need to measure how far it is from the actual rectangular base. So back over here with the caliper, I'm just going to get in here. So it's 3 millimeters away from the base. What I'm going to do is click this datum plane, and I'm going to offset it 3 millimeters in the Z direction. Now if I click OK, and then I go right-click this body and press Recompute Object, you can see the position of that nub actually changes. So I guess what I'm going to do next is actually model this little keyhole. It looks to be about 2 millimeters in diameter. And it's offset about 1 millimeter from the corner. So I'm going to click the top face of this base rectangle, make another sketch, and then I'm going to make a circle that is 2 millimeters in diameter. Now I want to offset this from the base at the bottom right corner. So I'm going to bring in both of these edges as construction lines. And then I think what I'm going to do is make 2 construction lines within this circle. And what FreeCAD has done is it's automatically constrained this to be vertical and horizontal. So now I have 2 points on the edges of this circle. So I can position it equally distanced from these external construction lines. So I think what I should be able to do is click this point and then click this line and set a distance constraint here. And I want it to be 1 millimeter from both of these. And now I'm just going to create a pocket and make sure that it goes all the way through this object. Now we need to actually put a hole in this barrel. It is 0.7 millimeters thick. Now I'm going to add this barrel's base as external geometry so I can get the center point. And then I'm going to create a circle centered on that point. And I guess what I'm going to do is make this 4 millimeters minus 0.7 millimeters. And you can see that automatically resolves in FreeCAD, and I can close this sketch. So since that thing is kind of hard to measure, I'm just going to create a pocket. And I'm going to change this drop down to up to face. And then I'm going to select this face. And as you can see, it is kind of poking out back here. So looking at this a little closer, it actually looks like this barrel goes back a little farther than I anticipated. It looks to be about 8 millimeters. So let me go back up in the history of the sketch here. And the first thing I'm going to do is make another datum plane on the base right here. And I'm going to offset that back in the Z direction by 8 minus 5.6 millimeters. And I'll just invert the sign here. Now I need to move this above this pad 1 here, which represents our cylinder. So I can right click and then say move feature after and click pad 1. So this moves the plane right before our cylinder. And now if I go to the sketch that makes up our cylinder, I can actually attach it to that plane that we just created. So now I've attached that sketch to this datum plane. Let's recompute this object. And that didn't work until I changed the length, but we're actually going to set this to 8 millimeters. I'm going to hide that datum plane, and I'm going to go forward in the sketch a little bit. So there we go, that's looking a lot better. Now the last thing we're going to want to do is model this internal nub. And it's kind of an L shape in here. So since I can't get my calipers in there, I'm just kind of going to eyeball it. It looks to be about half the width of this, and the width of that was 1 millimeter. So I'm going to say this is 0.5 millimeters. So I'm going to model this as 2 sketches starting from the base of this cylinder. Let's bring in some external construction geometry. And I'm going to draw a construction line from the center of this circle up to the edge. Once again, just to get this point at the base right here. So I'm going to draw this square that is just 0.5 millimeters wide. So if this bottom dimension is 0.5 millimeters, I need to make this side dimension 0.5 millimeters, but I also need to add an offset so it goes into this cylinder. So I'm going to make this 0.5 plus 0.15 millimeters, and that's 0.65 millimeters. So now I'm just going to make a construction point in the middle of this line. I'm going to make a construction line that is vertical and is 0.15 millimeters in length. Now, once again, I'm just going to constrain this up top here. And I want to extrude this thing all the way to the front. And actually, that does not look right. It seems to be offset the same amount as this top nub right here. So I should be able to measure that in FreeCAD with this caliper tool. There we go. So it's 0.6 millimeters. And the distance from this base is 5.6 millimeters. So actually, we need to extrude this 5 millimeters. So let me go here and change this from up to face to length, and we're going to make it 5 millimeters. So I'm going to make one final sketch right here. Once again, we're going to pull in some external geometry. The bottom of this little guiding mechanism, and this point right at the base of the cylinder. So now we can make a new square. We can constrain the length of this. One can be equal to the construction line here. And then I'm going to make these corners coincident. And once again, we want to offset this 0.15 millimeters in. Since this is super hard to measure, I'm just going to make this thing maybe 1 millimeter. And that's looking very accurate. So now it just looks like a kind of L. That's exactly what it looks like on the inside. So I sent this over to my buddy Joe, and I had him print it out on his Bamboo printer, which is an FDM printer, and that did not go well, to say the least, so I think I'm going to have to get this thing resin printed. So I've gone ahead and I've placed an order with PCBWay's 3D printing service to get this guy printed out of resin. It was a fairly simple process. I just had to upload the step file to their service, and they gave me a quote, and I ordered 3 of these things. So I will get back to you when these guys actually show up. So they have arrived, and it took about a week for them to show up. I didn't pay for fast shipping or anything like that, so I was kind of expecting that. There was an immediate glaring problem, and that is that I did not properly measure the barrel wall width. So I have to get this thing manufactured again. I have to make some slight updates to this CAD file, and it is super brittle. You can see some artifacts inside of here because the wall is so thin, or maybe you can't because it's completely white. But yeah, this thing is not a very good product for sure. I can't sell this. Now, actually, I was at work talking to one of my coworkers about this. His name is Neil, and I got him to 3D print this exact model with his resin printer, which surprisingly came out a lot better than PCBWay's. But yeah, I stuck this guy into the actual machine as soon as he gave it to me, and this is just a little too brittle. It cracks off inside of there. As you can see, it kind of flexes if you squeeze it too much, and it's very, very easy to break. Like, doing that and the thing pops off. That's not very good for being a key that needs to be actually used. These key rings did show up, but they don't actually fit through the hole very well. I bought this little tool to help open them up because I'm going to be opening a bunch of these things. But as you can see, when I slide it through the hole, it just barely fits. And as I put it more on, the fit gets tighter and tighter and tighter, and it's just not going to work very well. This thing has a grip on it as well, so I want to model a grip. I've actually colluded with my coworker Neil, and instead of ordering these things from China, I'm just going to pay him something like $250 to print me a batch of 400 of these, because I have like 200 key rings, and I want to turn them all into pairs of keys. So I'm going to make this hole a little bit wider, this barrel wall a little bit wider, and then I'm just going to add some little grips on here. So this is a batch of keys that I got from my coworker Neil today. You can see that I've kind of squished it a little bit in my bag and some of these supports are broken. What I need to do now is get all of these off of the base, and this is actually 108 of them in a batch. He very kindly printed me out 200 more than I actually asked for, so I've got a huge stockpile. So the process that I'm about to go through is take all of these off of this base, and then in pairs of 2, I'm going to use this tool and these pliers to put them onto these key rings here. And then that does leave a little scuff mark at the bottom where the key ring fits on. So I'm going to just very gently remove that with this magic eraser. I've already done a bunch of these. It's very time consuming, something I definitely did not anticipate. But I'm kind of too deep to stop now. So yeah, I guess I'm just going to grind some of these out. So now I have literally hundreds of these things just sitting around ready to go, and I need to figure out how I'm going to sell them. Now, based on the prices that I saw online, I want to go ahead and price under, considering this is not an OEM part. The cheapest I could find for an OEM part was about $90, and that was in a renewed state, whatever that's supposed to mean for a plastic key, with the new ones going for like $300 a piece. And the absolute best deal I found was that one on eBay, where they sold 5 pairs for $150. So I want to price these at a point where they're going to sell, and my margin is already going to be pretty high. So I'm thinking that to get the best of both worlds, I want to price one of these for like maybe $50. So that undercuts the OEM ones by a significant bit, and I want to add bulk pricing too, to incentivize people to buy more than one of these things. So from 2 of these, you're going to get a 10% discount. From 3 of these, you're going to get a 20% discount. And then if you buy 4 or more, you're going to get a 30% discount. And I think those numbers give me the best chance of selling as many of these as possible. So a couple of days ago, I did actually manage to sell 5 of these things. So I'm not quite out of the red yet. I spent about $300 on this project in total, and probably about a week of my time. Now, unfortunately, I wanted to get them out the door as quickly as possible, so I didn't have time to film them, but I still want to show you what the process of packing them looks like. So I've got this little slip that's going to fit into the bubble mailer. So packing these guys up is going to be that simple, and then I'll just schedule a pickup at my doorstep. And over maybe the next year or so, I'll make that back tenfold. So here's hoping. And I wasn't completely satisfied with the processing that I did. There were still a couple of scuffs on the back of some of them keys. So right here, I've got all the supplies to do some extra post-processing to these guys. And I actually sunk about most of the money that I got back from the keys into this. So I'm going to make this into a separate video because the process is going to be long. I haven't seen any other videos on the subject, and I really don't have too much time to mess with it at the moment. Ignore the other project going on in the back here. You guys are going to see what that is pretty shortly, hopefully. But anyway, thank all of you for watching. I know it's been a non-standard video, but I hope you got something out of this. And if you're interested, come back next time to see what I do with all of these materials.